Well, welcome to the channel. This is Reverend Dr. Jason W. Morrison, theologist, New South Wales, Australia. If you're listening to this and you take it personally as a woman or as a man, then you possibly need to have a closer look in the mirror at yourself. It's definitely by no way critical of anyone. We've just come to the point where I want to get this information out there for people who possibly aren't quite sure what a problem is that they're having. The thing that I'm talking about can be mistaken as a jealousy. You can be blamed for being jealous. You can be blamed as just being an interferer. There's a lot of things that you can be blamed for, but the subject that I'm quickly going to talk about is covert emotional incest. Incest being a very uncomfortable word for a lot of people. It can also be used, another term can be enmeshment, covert emotional enmeshment, or parentification, covert emotional parentification. Now, just a quick description of what this is. The situation with this is, and it's really sad, is when the parents of the family are dysfunctioning, they're not intimately working properly, there's a division or a derision that's risen up between them, or there's even a breakup. What will happen is, let's take the mother and the son, for instance. If the sons stay with the mother, well, what the mother will do while she's transitioning along in her life, she'll parentify the child. She'll draw that child closer to herself in a way in which goes outside the boundaries of a parent-child relationship. She'll start to share parts of her life with that child that she ought only to share with a therapist or with a partner. And what this does then is open this child right up to intimate details, private details of adult business. And once that engagement takes place, there's a sense of grandizement, there's a sense of being pedestalized, there's a sense of being exalted as it rises up in a child, and they become what's called parentified. Now, there's a lot of psychological impacts relative to this, but what I want to talk about is the mother, just leave the child for a sec, who cannot, with this, find sexual satisfaction. There's an emotional grooming, as it were, that can only go so far. These people will be sarcastic, they'll be arrogant towards usually men. The mother will start to infiltrate the integrity of men and paint a picture that's not so pretty of men. I can say I experienced this as a child, even though my father really did do the wrong thing by my mother and he got removed. The picture that was painted of my father couldn't have been more evil or punishing and unforgiving than the one I was given. We become Christians and learnt what forgiveness was, and through that journey I went and found my father, who was very he'd punished himself as well for what he had done. He never got to know us, so it was quite a journey finding my father and coming to terms and facing him for what he'd done and listening to him say sorry. One of the beautiful things that come out of that was the reconciliation of my father and my mother after decades of hostility and enmity. And this was the power of Christ that brought this reconciliation about. When you meet someone, let's say that a single mother who's got teenage children, or even as young as in before teens, to be honest, if the child's only known their mother for the most part of their lives, where that consciousness starts to kick in as they go into their teens, right up to 20s, 30s, 40s, 50s and 60s, covert emotional incest, sorry about the jittering of the phone, covert emotional incest, once it's established in the relationship between the mother and the son, will stay there for life. It's just the way that it is. And because there is a maternal, genuine, legitimate maternal aspect to it, and you can't ever take that away from anyone, and you wouldn't want to. In my instances where I had to deal with people that were in covert emotional incest, one thing I always said to the mother was, I never ever want to be a barrier between you and your children. And that was all well and good, and I never was. But the problem was the children were a barrier between me and her. And to some extent, I think that worked as a shield for the woman as well. People in covert emotional incest will in some way have a level of covert self-sabotage towards the relationship based on the security that they get out of the maternal parentified bond that they have with their child. Child will never leave me or forsake me, as it were. And that goes for the child with the mother as well. And they have this deep subliminal self-sabotage parachute rescue option in the maternal bond should the relationship fail. And this actually assists in the failure of their relationships, because it's self-prophetic. When partners come into their lives, they're, as much as they don't want to lose the relationship, that expectation, that fear of abandonment is always underlying and sabotaging their ability to bond to their partner. And it instills the bond between the mother and the child, or the adult child. And so they find themselves in this vicious vortex that holds them back from really emotionally connecting with their partner and being finding their security ultimately in the bond that they have, child to mother, mother to child. The partners of these people get a sense that there is a lack of emotional connection, and you try and work out where it's going. Like, why isn't this connection taking place as deeply as it should? Because they're present, but there's just that deep emotional, you'll get senses of it here and there, and it will indicate to you that it's possible, but it's not sustained. And I've said to a couple of these partners, I don't know who you're emotionally connecting with, but I really don't feel like it's me, because you're getting all the physical attributes and connections and things. And in one instance, I remember coming home one day in my second marriage, and she was talking in depth about our personal finances, and I couldn't comprehend why that would be happening, because this was a 20-year-old that couldn't even pay his rent and wasn't able to manage his finances at all, and I could not comprehend why this woman, apparently my wife at the time, was discussing in depth our finances with somebody that really had no clue of how any of it went. and I challenged it, and I chastised it because it was completely out of order. But what it indicated to me was this woman has allowed this 20-year-old son of hers to begin to be involved in our personal marital business, and I was concerned. Well, that was okay until we were challenged about not paying. He was challenged about not paying his rent and not living up to some of the conditions of which he was required to live with us, because he come to live with us after wearing out his welcome at his dad's place. And ultimately, the bond that was created between the mother and the son was so strong, I had to ask them to leave. I had to go ask her to house him somewhere else, because he had now positioned himself into a situation where my wife was his wife, and I wasn't going to tolerate that. Of course, she was going to have maternal defences, and I was trying to work in with that, but it all got so out of control and so out of order. It was like there was a coup about to happen in my own home. This went on for 5 or 6 weeks. There was no resolve, and as I said, I had to ask this woman to leave, which isn't a very nice thing to do in a marriage. It's demoralising, actually, but she was torn to bits, but she had to go with the maternal, and that was fine by me, and the marriage was dissolved. Now, that cost me hundreds of thousands of dollars, and I didn't even do anything wrong. So you can see why I've got a real vitriol towards this covert emotional incestual, not only self-sabotaging, micro-characteristic dark triad description of it, it also sabotages the people that connect intimately with these people, and it can become very costly, and it's really of no dysfunction of your own. It's covert because these people are assassinating you, psychologically assassinating you behind your back. It's run on their emotional lust for each other. It is relentless and ruthless. The children, adult children, will feign psychological trouble, being troubled, unable to cope with or stand for the presence of another person with the mother. They'll feign needing the mother at deep levels so that the mother gets drawn away from you. And I did challenge that because it got so ridiculous. One of these guys would just totally intrude upon our time together, and she'd be drawn away. So it was coming to my attention, this was the second case, that this was going to be another case where it was going to be completely out of my control. I wasn't sure how she was going to develop herself with my challenges, and to be quite frank, instead of setting up boundaries around the relationship and the adult child or children, she just didn't know how to do that. She didn't know how to endorse me as a man against their objections of who I was, even though I was proven. As a matter of fact, the daughter of the woman I was married to went down there to try and infiltrate and sabotage my new relationship due to a vendetta of challenging her on being on the internet, chasing other men when she was married. And mind you, she was singing at the church at the time. The the evil behind this is so wicked. The mind boggles. But if you're aware of it, you can try and navigate it as it's happening. So I have to take my hat off to the lady that I met after that marriage. When the daughter went down there to try to infiltrate the relationship, they had the sense to go, something's not right here, and we carried on. Problem was, though, her sons became troubled with their mother receiving a good quantity of masculinity and love and order, and it caused quite a panic. Again, I'm not judging, I'm just saying, and you've got to try and manage this in a constructive way. I called it out. It really deteriorated into quite a series of episodes. But what I found very, very confronting was, and I found it confronting because my mother used to pull us into line. She'd pull us into line pretty quick and go, this is my man, this is my relationship, and you've got no right to interfere in it. Okay? And we just go, yeah, you're right, and get on with it. I didn't find that with these women. They were so enmeshed with their sons, I don't think they were able to find a way that they could stand for the relationship without feeling conflicted with the adult child. Because the adult children, once they start to psychologically disintegrate via jealousy, via all those micro-characteristic dark triad traits, they go in complete opposition and they start feigning behaviour that'll get the attention of the mother, and all sorts of conflictive strategies to undermine the relationship between the mother and the new partner or the partner. When the mother doesn't, and I would point this out very carefully, because you don't undermine people or cause division either, but I'd point out what was going on, and sure enough, to the T, I was right. So you can imagine the alarm on the mother's face when she's watching it and I'm predicting it just taking place. The problem is, if the woman that you're with cannot stand for the relationship, the child will get the separation one way or another between you and her. And that child will even go as far as accusing you of things that aren't real, suggesting that you've violated them emotionally in some way, and it can't be tolerated. And it leaves the mother in a situation, if she doesn't get it right at the start, it's going to go bad for you as the partner. And so it's very important that you watch carefully how the mother's navigating her side of the relationship in bringing to order her children, because that's not your job. Do not engage these children in these manifestations, because that's what they want you to do. They want to tie you up in the conflict, and then they'll bring the mother in and use it all against you. Just don't engage. Just stand back and let it all happen. And if you get a sense that the mother is measuring your masculinity by your unengagement, don't worry about that either, because it's not. It's wisdom. And an alpha male will know when to disengage. So as she's not producing boundaries that are going to benefit the relationship, you know that her value is more towards the maternal bond and not the relationship, and you need to take heed of that. Now, at that point, if you decide to run, that's completely up to you. But if you want to see if it can develop more towards a relationship, that's also up to you as well. But for the most part, the adult child, if she doesn't set up boundaries immediately, it's just going to progress in the negative. To the point where you'll be either isolated from their house if they live together in the house. You won't be welcome there, and it's best if you don't go there, particularly when you see what levels of disintegration can take place with these people. Also, you don't want to judge anybody. You just want to be open about what the problem is and how it's affecting you. And if it becomes abusive, which it is, even in its early forms, right up until its full manifestation, you'll find that if it's unresolved, at some point it can really work against you. Unresolved's got a way of making a woman start to look for self-soothing in people outside the relationship, and that could be males as well. Because you'll find yourself in a web of evil, and none of it's you. You can't blame yourself for any of it, because it's all happening around your presence and your power. And if you're working in integrity and you're practicing your masculinity and love with that woman, and she's not standing for it, you will standing for the relationship against this spirit, this divisive spirit called covert emotional incest or enmeshment or parentification. You will come to the point where the oppression will be so heavy and the opposition will be so prevalent that you will have to decide that you need to get out. It's time to go. I hope this isn't happening to you. I hope it doesn't happen to you. Again, I'm not being judgmental on the parent or the children. This is a real life consequence of marriages not working out and people wanting to be loved beyond that, and relationships not working out where children are involved and people wanting to get on in life beyond that. But unfortunately, the way in which things domestically and psychologically form between single parents and their children after these events can impact their future relationships, usually for the rest of their lives. This is Reverend Dr. Jason W. Morrison, theologist. Thank you for joining me. I hope this helps, and bye for now.